In the case of Forrest Gump, Mandela believers are left with the devastating fact that Gump now says life was like a box of chocolates, rather than life is like a box of chocolates. Of course, we know nothing has changed, and it was always and still was, save for editing or revision if true. I trust the audio, but I also know there are many compounding reasons to why some believe it used to be is. So the possibilities to why this collective memory of the word is persists are worth looking over. First, there appears to be another take of this bench scene, where Gump actually says is. We know it's another take because the audio is different. Let's be clear. It is most certainly not the same take. That means no magical change and no tampering in the audio. In my audio engineering fashion, I of course created juxtaposition for you to listen to and confirm they are different takes. For this comparison, we pick one limiting factor. For this, we choose to align the very first word as best as they can. The rest of the audio then falls where it may as far as timing, inflection, and tone are concerned. This way we observe and hear the true differences. I separated them, putting each on its own channel. So the left channel contains is, and the right channel contains was. In case you want to hear them separately for a moment, just pan your audio card at setting left or right respectively.
My mom always said life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Clearly, they are different takes. The real question remains, was that take used at any point in an official release, cementing is in our memory? Perhaps used in a preview or a trailer-type video? Or, and here's our second possibility, did is come from Mama's line in the movie and a few other external variables we'll discuss later? Mama says the line later in the film when we are most immersed in it. The last memory of probably a much more poignant and some might say more emotional scene is of Mama saying the famous line, but with is. The fact Hanks used is at some point in making the film, regardless of the final cut, settling with was exemplifies the actor's choice of wording, whimsical or intentional, as an artistic choice. Which, although not grammatically correct, is certainly not a shifting reality either. That brings us to the third possibility, the choice of using is or was, and reinforcing the nature of Gump's character. Was it Hanks or the director's human error letting it slide as was in the final take? Or, as we just touched on, was it deliberate to exhibit charm of the kind-hearted imperfection of Gump? Again, Gump's appeal in this sense is that he is a decent guy, quote-unquote, even though he is perhaps slow and maybe not the sharpest tool in the shed. His improper use of language throughout the movie adds to that sense of childlike innocence. So, obviously, that less seen clip circulating on YouTube, originally from Tom Hanks's site, shows that Hanks used the word is, and that was an entirely different take. People must understand this little fact. It was absolutely, utterly a different take. The delivery, the inflection, the timing are all different, including, of course, the use of is. And I do advise to watch this video from Hanks's site and not the one on YouTube. Why? Because the Mandela person on YouTube felt the need to edit out some detail that would show it wasn't the same take with different angles. The angled shots are because of auxiliary cameras filming behind-the-scene footage, not part of the camera work of the movie. You clearly realize this watching the unaltered version on Hanks's website. It is not residual evidence as the believers want us to believe. And to reiterate, residuals as part of shifting realities are an impossibility. One more time, The Mandela effect believers foolishly invoke evidence that refutes their argument. Clearly, Hanks said it both ways. And there's probably good reason "is" was used in promotional material, not just based on Mama's line solely. The final version, however, Hanks uses the word "was." So perhaps a director's decision to adhere to the original script, since, after all, "was" is in the original script. Was it Hanks's decision based on the director's vision of the Gump character in using improper English here and there? Could be either way by either individuals. The point is, it's a big possibility this take was used in the theater debut, and that heavily influenced our memory. This still shot of what seems officially from the film possibly indicates this alternate take was indeed used originally in theaters. I leave that as a possibility, but if it's not the case, Hanks' use of "is" still probably influenced the movie behind the scenes. With the more probable quote reference, specifically Mama's line as the primary source for promotional material and memorabilia, the repetitive exposure to "is" in turn created a medley influencing our memory. The year is 1994, and in July debuts the movie Forrest Gump. We walk away with certain impressionable memories of it. Surrounding us are TV, newspapers, magazines, radio, parodies, clothing, posters, mostly saying, "Life is like a box of chocolates." Mama says "is." The box of the movie says "is." The promotional materials say "is." And feeding into that again, with ceaseless momentum, the endless parodies and mimics of that line say "is." Even if the take saying "is" was never in circulation, therefore never seen by an audience, there's enough influence by other sources implanting "is" in the memory. Another indirect cause could simply be our assumption the reprinted quote necessarily belongs to Gump. Perhaps the use of this quote in official memorabilia and products was solely based on Mama, to emphasize a mother's wisdom. This explains why most things related to the film referenced "is." Are you aware, by the way, visual memory, although by no means perfect, is far superior to auditory memory for most people? I've known this for some time because of my expertise and experience in audio. There are many studies that expound on this, such as this one here. Of course, internal bias is first and foremost most controlling of our memory. But visual superiority in an otherwise congruent environment has a big impact and leads to my next point. I bet that we have actually seen the quote, "Life is like a box of chocolates," much more than heard it in the actual movie. Think about that. Let's say you've seen the movie even 10 times, in the 90s no less. The frequency by which promotional material lurks around us, innocuous to a degree, is so much higher than the product itself. Even when you go to the movie theater, framed promotional posters of the movie you are about to see stare you right in the eye, and surely at that time nobody gave undivided attention to every single word in the movie. That includes famous lines as well. So a trace of the line lingers. It lingers just enough in our memories with the most vital parts, that is, life, box, and chocolates. This lingers in our subculture, at our water cooler conversations, in print, what have you. This exposes itself more to us than the source itself. What's the likelihood Mama's line, superior visual cues such as promotional items, memorabilia, the movie box itself, and our exposure to this all with heightened exigency by Mandela effect is forcing us now to question this quote? I'd say damn good. The same applies to some of the other examples, such as the vampire. If this Mandela effect nonsense wasn't a hot topic, the line would be what it is and nobody would think anything of it. Since Mama and other influences say life is like a box of chocolates, it kept the suggestibility of it intact more or less. Having bias towards proper English, we also favor instances of is, whether from Mama's line or the promo materials. It doesn't take many times to lock in the memory of the quote's overall effect. Watching it again another time without giving it a thought, expectation fills in the blank as we take in the experience as a whole with visual cues and Mama's line accompanying the memory in parallel. The emotional satisfaction is from the general sentiment and meaning of not only the line, but the entire movie. Only with forced scrutiny does the general sentiment manifest as dissonance as one grapples with trifle. The same can be said going the other way of a mistaken account. In many of these examples, the memory is based on a mistake, but not because it is due to a bad memory necessarily, but a mismemory, misinformation having shaped the memory. Inversely, articles dated even to 1994, like this one, published about a week after the movie's debut no less, that misquote the line in other ways, prove human errors at play at any given moment. Whether mismemory or bad memory, it shows how information is at our mercy, not the other way around. But collective memory dissonance is most likely than not spurred by misinformation-based memories. Suggestibility, conflation, circulated wrong information, and the inability to detect such shapes how we remember something. Add to that sudden, hair-splitting dissection of inconsequential detail that we typically ignore, and you get a supposed prolific narrative such as the Mandela effect. This effect thrives on confusion. Maybe it is now out of some strange boredom, I think, that we pick at things like the corner of our thumbnails. We have to make something of nothing, so we take inadvertence, errors, misinformation, and word of mouth and run with it, dragging poor mutable memory behind us to build a phantasm, in this case being the Mandela effect. Another factor possibly contributing to the prominence of is, as we mentioned, involves the tenses in the actual line. Let's first establish a technical aspect of language. The line calls for is, absolutely no doubt about that. Was is not proper English here. Forrest is describing something his mother said, not a condition of his mother or a specific thing in a past time period, in which case was would be fine since she no longer exists, or that specific event has changed. But her quote describes the perpetual, that is, life, and so the linking verb should apply properly to the tense of the subject, which is life in this case. Life exists, and as a general statement about it, the characteristic of it is akin to a box of chocolates at any given moment of time. Life as a general thing is like a box of chocolates. The past really has nothing to do with this general characteristic of life being a perpetual thing. For example, if Gump were to have said Mama's life or her life was like a box of chocolates, that would work fine because his mama is no longer alive, which focuses now on a specific subject of the past. The only past tense focus in Gump's line should be focused on the action of speech, namely Mama's speech. Because Mama said this line, and she has already passed, my mama always said works fine. Even with indirect speech, where a present participle can be used, the past action of speech in this case, said, still warrants the past tense. I want to make this point clear because I've seen arguments to impute Mandela effect by asserting was only makes sense because he's talking about what his mama said in the past. As we see, this doesn't quite work as an argument. More importantly, the talk about proper tense and grammar as it relates to what a character like Forrest Gump said is to me ludicrous. Gump's character, part of his charm is being a simpleton but a man with a quote-unquote good heart. His use of language, I think, one would expect lack of sophistication and accuracy. In the mind of Gump, referencing something from the past, he would put everything in that particular memory improperly under the umbrella of past tense. This naturally raises the possibility why Hanks said was, to show congruence with Gump's character. Keeping in mind with language as opposed to marketing, we expect congruity. Gump gives us incongruity, perhaps based on the fact he doesn't use proper grammar often enough. Even though Forrest said was, in our cognitive bias we edit it to is, the word that gives us salience. We should also note the sequence of use of was and is. Forrest is first to say was regarding the famous chocolate line. It's an introduction to the line. We absorb the basic gist of it. Mama was second and was the confirmation of the line, even though she had said it differently, and what's more is that she delivers congruity to us by using the proper word is. Mama seals the deal of a highly influential quote. Finally, here's some interesting yet related trivia illustrating this grammatical point. Here's a quote from IMDb. Forrest never uses the word were, saying was instead, apart from one scene where Jenny, on her deathbed, says she wishes she were with him on his adventures, and Forrest replies, "You were." There is also the clip of Hanks on the James Corden show allegedly saying is like a box of chocolates. The Mandela Effect followers are using this as evidence as well. Of course, our initial thought is, if somebody mixes up an insignificant word of a piece of dialogue from 20 years ago, it's a minor oversight. But upon further examination, we find that Hanks is not even saying is, but rather was like a box of chocolates. I slowed down the audio to fully debunk this nonsense.
Mama always said life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
Once again, in haste, as we've seen before, the believers jump to conclusions to coerce the narrative to fit the belief. These evidences mistakenly assumed to prove Mandela Effect are indeed probative contradictions to Mandela Effect. Like many of the other examples, the case of Forrest Gump is also ripe with simultaneous evidence. And by now we understand simultaneous evidence to be automatically debunking. Examples can be found throughout newspaper archives, where you find many instances of is, and some like this, dated July 6, 1994, the use of was. One more time we have simultaneous evidence and an upset in chronology, which is equally important. To bring attention to Mandela Effect, people shooting themselves in the foot unknowingly by presenting proof of simultaneous evidence, one sees comments like,
"It's so creepy, since the movie box cover says life is like a box of chocolates."
it boggles the mind. The thought that we are mistakenly assuming Gump's actual line consisted of is all along because of the reasons discussed thus far is not what comes to mind for the Mandela effect folk. Instead, thoughts like,
the timeline and reality are shifting because CERN disturbed the fabric of space-time,
are what fill the gaps. The believers don't consider the influences, that is, all the mimics, skits, parodies, promotional material, and memorabilia ever made on this famous line. The casualness of this is revealed yet. Some use the line verbatim, adhering to was, and some use the overall impressionistic memory they have of the movie. Impressions from Mama, the movie box, cover, and promotional materials using is, even though not accurate as far as Gump actually saying it. It's not creepy, and it's really not that mysterious, and it's not shifting reality. It's not the Mandela effect. There is no metaphysical phenomenon here, just influence, mix-up, and possible alternate material.